Everyone, thank you so much for everyone coming out. Those of you that don't know me, I am Jess Moore. I am the Wildland Project Coordinator here at Evergreen Fire Rescue. I would like to take a quick second and introduce Chief Mike Weegee. He is the one who supports me in all my crazy endeavors and the things that I do for us. And then our new division chief, Jason Puffett, is here as well. And I'm going to go ahead and run through, since Jeremy Sincere sitting there. Jeremy Jones is Battalion or Assistant Fire Chief at Clear Creek County Fire Authority. Then up front, I've got Tony Acello with Jefferson County Open Space. Pete Anderson, retired West Metro or South Metro?
West Metro.
West Metro. Tony, Jeremy, Pete are all part of our advisory board for the Community Wildfire Protection Plan that we're working on. Y'all are here tonight because we are in the process of updating our Community Wildfire Protection Plan. Those of you that do not know, our Community Wildfire Protection Plan is our guiding document for wildfire work, mitigation work, emergency preparedness for wildfires in our community. I'm going to also introduce here very quickly, before we get fully going, Carrie Gooding and Meg Matonis. They are with the Ember Alliance. They're going to do the vast majority of the presentation tonight. The Ember Alliance is an organization that we have contracted to do the Community Wildfire Protection Plan update. We had a plan update in 2020. Colorado State Forest Service recommends that you update every 5 years. So the update we are currently working on will get adopted in 2025, at the beginning of 2025. So we stay on that schedule of updating. So with that, I am going to, well, real quick, how many ambassadors and ambassador team members do I have in the room? So if you're not familiar with some of our work with Evergreen Fire, we have plan units, and we'll talk about those tonight as well, but we have plan units throughout our entire district. Everyone who lives in Evergreen is a part of a plan unit. We can't do the work we do with getting information and home assessments and mitigation events and chipping and stuff into the community without the help of these volunteers. We have 26 plan units, 25 of them have ambassadors or ambassador team members working within them to help us get information out into the community, to help us drum up that grassroots organizing of getting our community better prepared for wildfire. So again, plan units, those will be talked about a little bit throughout this, and that's something, again, everyone who raised their hand is a volunteer that lives in our community. And I always want to give tremendous thanks to them for helping us do the work we do. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Carrie. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Jess. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for taking the time to be here. We just want to start off with letting you know how much we appreciate your commitment and dedication to Evergreen and being a part of this process. And we really just want you to know that the community input is a very important part of the CWPP, which the first C is community. So big thank you to all of you taking the time to be here. Jess did a great job of introducing us, but I wanted to just touch on the Ember Alliance. That is the organization that Meg and I work for. So we are a nonprofit that is based in northern Colorado. We're up in Fort Collins, so not too far. And our team works with partners across the country to restore people's relationships with fire and restore ecosystem processes with fire as well. So broadly, we kind of do this in a few ways. We do various types of training, both classroom and on-the-ground training. We also work to put good fire on the ground through some of our fields projects and prescribed fire and our fire operations. And we work with communities like you on community wildfire protection planning, which is why we're all here tonight. A little bit more about me and Meg. So my name is Carrie Gooding, and I am a CWPP project manager with the Ember Alliance. I did grow up in the wildland urban interface out in California, and I lost a home to fire in 1998. So wildfires and preparedness and everything we're talking about today, that's very near and dear to my heart. More recently, I have a master's degree in conservation leadership, and I'm about 3 miles and 45 pounds short of attaining my red card. So maybe next time you see me, I'll have it. Evergreen is one of the projects I'm currently working on, and I'm super excited to learn more from all of you tonight. And with that, I'll let Dr. Meg Matonis introduce herself.
I have the fortune to be Carrie's coworker. I'm a senior wildfire analyst with the Ember Alliance, and I've been an on-call wildland firefighter with the Larimer County Sheriff's Office since 2013. And I've assisted with a lot of CWPPs in Jefferson County, including the Jefferson County CWPP, which is out for public review right now. So I hope all of you who are interested take the opportunity to look through that and share comments so that we can address those before it is finalized. I'm personally very honored that you came back to the Ember Alliance to help with the update. I was on the team that did the 2020 CWPP. It was one of the first CWPPs we worked on. It came out before the new Colorado State Forest Service standards, which now hold CWPPs to a little bit higher standard for being implementable, which is, the new standards are fantastic. So your update will comply with the new standards. We've received a lot of feedback on deficiencies in the 2020 plan, and we've been taking those seriously, writing them down. We want this plan to be something that you all are really proud of and that can really help you continue along the path, because so many people in this community are already really engaged. And like Jess was saying, the CWPP is a really important foundation to a lot of the work that's being done here.
Great. All right, getting into what we are talking about today. So we have a relatively short agenda. We are going to start off with the basics of CWPPs and really what we want you to walk away with understanding about CWPPs and the CWPP process. Next, we're going to do an activity that we're calling the Community Voice, which is an activity that will focus mostly on listening to you instead of me talking at you. And so coming out of this activity, our intention is really for us to walk away with an understanding of what is important to you, so we can infuse that across the CWPP process and in the CWPP document. Then after that activity, we're going to come back all together and finish up with a little bit more detail on the CWPP update timeline and where and when you might be hearing from us next in the process. So, for the first part of the meeting, it will be a presentation. Shocker, we're already in it. And we're just going to go over the basics of the CWPP. And we purposely made this part of the community meeting tonight short, this presentation part short, and to the point because our understanding is that you all at least have a basic understanding of CWPPs, what they are, and like I mentioned before, we want to do a little bit more listening than we do talking. So I'll just ask for this first part, if you please hold your question until the end of the presentation. We'll have some time to go over any comments, concerns, and questions you have then. We'll have the time during the activity to go over that as well, and then at the end of the session. So starting with the super basic, I just want to touch on what a CWPP is and what a CWPP is not, so we kind of have a common understanding going into this conversation and the activities. So a CWPP is both a process and a plan. So it's something that we've already started, the facilitated process, that is really about getting you, the community, to see and understand the risk of wildfire and prioritize the steps to reduce that risk. We feel that this process, the repeated connections that are built during this process between agencies, community groups, residents, landowners, land managers, really anyone involved in the CWPP process, that those relationships are the basis for continued and future collaborations. And so that's the really important piece, is that first thing is the process and kind of like all of the work and all of the people that go into actually making the plan, the second piece of it, so the document that is produced based on the process, based on these relationships, and based on all of the engagement that we have throughout the process. It's also important to understand what a CWPP is not, and a CWPP is not a legally binding document or a funding source. So when we are creating the CWPP, when we release the CWPP, that really does not require you to take any action. We would like for you to take action, but there's no legal recourse, and we're really not here to dictate what you are doing on your own property or in your own community. And then looking at the funding piece, the CWPP itself is not a source of funding. It does not guarantee any funding. It's also not just a checkbox for a grant application. It's really about all of the work that we put in on the front end. So when we get to that end state of the CWPP document, that we have, like I said, all of those benefits of the process and of the relationships that we're building throughout it once we get there. So really what I want you to take away from this is it's about the CWPP process. So what we're kind of folding in now with the community engagement, and it's about the document that we have at the end of the process. The real value in having that document is the conversations, the analyses, and the kind of momentum that we create through the process to take the action forward after we're done, after we're out of this room, after we have the document. CWPPs, while they are not a funding source, they are really helpful in acquiring funding. So if you think about it that way, it's really like the easier acquisition of funding is a benefit of a CWPP, and the better CWPP you have, the better chance of funding you have. So, not going to give you money necessarily, but part of the process. Okay, so I'd also like to touch on Community Wildfire Protection implementation plans. These are kind of a legacy thing that have been in Evergreen for a long time, and they are connected to the current planning that we're doing for the CWPP update. So a CWPIP is a document that is similar to a CWPP, but it's for the individual plan units, like Jess was mentioning. So these documents were created from a need for a little bit more specificity than the previous CWPPs may have provided. And the main components of these CWPIPs were the community risk and the implementation actions and recommendations. So those are kind of the two types of documents that we're thinking about today as we're going into the planning of the CWPP update for 2025. Before diving into our approach for the update, I just wanted to put this quote up on the screen to kind of remind us why we're here and how important all of our input is in this process. So community wildfire protection plans represent the best opportunity we have to address the challenges of the wildland-urban interface in a way that brings about comprehensive and locally supported solutions. And that's from the Colorado State Forest Service. Okay, so we have the basics of the CWPPs and the CWPIPs in our minds. And we also have, as Meg mentioned, the recently released Jefferson County CWPP that is open for public comment. With that also in mind, here is how we are approaching the 2025 update for Evergreen. So we view at the top there, Jefferson County CWPP as one of the three tiers of efforts towards a common goal of understanding fire risk and taking steps towards wildfire preparedness and mitigating that risk. So looking at those three different tiers of planning efforts, each level has a different view, ranging from at the top there with Jefferson County, the more strategic and broad, going down to a little bit more detail when we get to the Evergreen CWPP tier, and then even more detail as we look at the intent of CWPIPs and how they've been used in the past. So each of those tiers provides a little bit more specificity for the priorities and the recommendations and actions and so on. And we recognize that within Evergreen, at least, that there has been a desire for more detail in the implementation actions and recommendations at the plan unit level. Thus, the CWPIPs were created. And learning from this need, we have the approach that we are taking to the 2025 update for Evergreen is to incorporate the CWPIPs into the CWPP update and have that 10,000 foot view and the 2,000 foot view kind of combined together. And the intention behind that is that we believe that we will be able to enable cross-boundary coordination and collaborations for some of the priority projects and the fuel treatments if we have those CWPIPs up with the CWPPs.
What does FPD stand for?
Which one?
FPD?
Fire Protection District. Yeah, sorry about that. Pete has made a note in our advisory committee meetings to stay away from acronyms, and I did not do that, so apologies for that.
And the CWPIPs in the CWPP, they're gonna look different from what you have now. They're not gonna be 60-page documents for each plan unit. If you wanna look at an example of what you can expect, the Cold Creek Canyon CWPP that just released has a really good example of it. So it's shorter, targeted on actions. There's going to be a zoomed in map that will show priority areas for treating along roadways, and for like fuel treatments will be prioritized across the fire protection district. Some of those might be adjacent to your plan. Those will show up in that map. So you want to get a sense of what the end product is going to look like, so you're not surprised at the end. Maybe just could, I think we shared some examples with you, so maybe you could share that with all the ambassadors. But they are useful products. It's an approach we've been taking with other communities, and shorter is sweeter and more effective a lot of the times. So just don't be surprised, but we're keeping in mind what you want the CWPIPs to do, and we think what we're doing will help you accomplish what you want with it.
So as you are engaging with the different planning processes and the different efforts and the different tiers we have here, we're kind of just asking that you consider that each planning effort has kind of a different depth, a different breadth, a different scope, with the same intention in the tiered approach across the efforts to achieve that common goal of risk reduction and wildfire preparedness. We're almost done with the slides, I swear. So moving along to just looking at the overall CWPP process and kind of where we are along it. This is a very high level roadmap of the CWPP process and the update process. Currently we are between points 1 and 2. We began our partner engagement in June of this year, and we are continuing to engage the relevant partners throughout the process. We're kicking off our wider community involvement tonight with you all here. And we are, as far as analyses and data go, we are kind of on our way to point 2. And with that, we are looking into similar, not necessarily similar, but we're looking into related documents like the 2022 Community Mitigation or Community Wildfire Risk Assessment, the 2022 Community Mitigation Assistance Team, the other CWPPs in the area, and we're using those as kind of reference points since there has been a lot of analysis done in your area, and we want to be able to kind of bring that all together. And if Meg, I think Meg, there were a couple things you wanted to say about the analysis you're doing.
Yeah, so there's like the Colorado State Forest Service has done a wildfire risk assessment, the Jefferson County Open Space did a wildfire risk assessment, so we're not doing our own, we're building off of the analyses that have already been done, and those are the ones that were also used in the Jefferson County CWPP. We will be doing more localized analysis of what the fire hazard from these other analyses means to values at risk in your community. And we've been working with the advisory committee to make sure that they feel like the analyses that have been done for the entire state make sense for your area. And we're looking at wildfire behavior, exposure of homes and other values at risk. We're also looking at evacuation. So we're focusing on congestion, not evacuation timing. It's going to be helping to prioritize where to do roadside fuel treatments. And then in the 2020 CWPP, I did a post-fire hazard assessment. So we'll use that to help with stage 3. So that's kind of the scope and breadth of that hazard and risk analysis.
Yep, and that kind of just goes over where we are right now between points 1 and 2. And then 3 and 4 with prioritization and implementation and getting to that final state of the document. That'll take us into early 2025. So it is a little bit longer of a process. And we're kind of in the beginning stages just now. And I will go over a little bit more on the details of the timeline after our activity, and when we kind of come back for wrap up, we will have a little bit more detail there, and we will be able to speak to any questions you might have at that point as well. And speaking of the advisory committee, Jess did introduce a few folks that are in room that are from our advisory committee, but these are the folks that we have so far engaged from a partner level, and these are the folks that we meet with every couple of weeks to do our CWPP planning, and we look to for kind of guidance and advice and support. And so I wanted to put them up here to say thank you for the ones that are here and the ones that might be watching on YouTube. And just kind of pay some homage to the folks that are ushering us through this process and acting as leaders.
And yeah, so we talk about Jefferson County a lot, mostly because we help with the Jefferson County CWPP and help with the Jefferson County Open Space Health Plan, but we do have Jeremy Jones from Clear Creek Fire on the advisory committee, so we are going to be continuing to interface with their work on their CWPP, so there'll be different, we'll take into account the conditions in Clear Creek Fire, their fire responsibilities, and their priorities as well.
All right, so this is our first opportunity for any questions that folks would like to ask, either on what we have gone over so far, anything CWPP related, anything you want to ask us. After this, I promised it would be a short presentation, so after this we are going to move to an activity, a group activity with all of you, and we will be able to answer questions, or if there's any one-on-one conversations you want to have, we can do that. But it looks like we have one question now.
Hi, thank you. My question is, Evergreen has a lot of open space parks like Meadow, Easty Park. Are those going to be part of the Evergreen plan, or is that more like Jeffco plan, or do these use actually a Denver park? How are those going to be incorporated into this?
I might ask my colleagues. for
Yeah.
help.
So we'll have like Denver Mountain Parks and Jefferson County Open Space Newtonian are members of the advisory committee. So when it comes time to determine where there's priority fuel treatments, they'll be bringing their priorities from like the Jefferson County Open Space Forest Health Plan, and Andy Perry with Denver Mountain Parks knows their priorities, but we have worked with them on multiple CWPPs. They are sincerely interested in like taking into account all the information gathered from these CWPPs and using that to help guide some of their local efforts in the area. Like maybe they wanted to do a treatment here, but after this process, like you were saying, the process and the communication, maybe the community is more supportive and there's bigger need to protect values at risk if they treat a different part of the same property. They're really open and interested in that. So they use their plans to help guide because they invested a lot of time in that, and their priorities managing across the entire park system, not just the parks that are in Evergreen, but the work they do in Evergreen. They want to be informed by the CWPP.
Yeah, and we work super closely with them, so, for Denver Mountain Parks in particular, like I've written grants to do work in conjunction with them for using our 2020 CWPP that identified hazardous road areas that, I took Denver Mountain Parks property, wrote a grant so that we could get work done to mitigate the roadside that was Denver Mountain Parks property. So we work in super tight partnership. Tony and I were texting back and forth today over some other stuff that's out there, like we work super closely with these guys. It's great.
Do you want to add anything to it?
No, I think that's perfect. Yeah.
In the back there.
What is the framework for terminology going forward? I noticed in reading the part of the Jeffco draft plan, the terminology is different from the State Forest Service, and I'm confused as to what's where we're going with the terminology like SIZ versus HIZ and those kind of things.
Yes, so that one is, I'm not sure how the State Forest Service is gonna respond to that, but the National Fire Protection Agency has just shifted from using home ignition zone to structure ignition zone, because the work doesn't just need to be done around homes. You know, like the Evergreen Fire Rescue has done work around their structures to harden them. So that's just why the concept isn't any different. It's still the same kind of work you do from 0 to 5 feet, 5 to 30 feet, 0 to or 30 to 100 feet. It's just to try to make it clear that businesses also need to be following these standards. It's not just somebody with a home. So the concept is the same. I know it is very frustrating, the terminology gets different, but that is what is now being nationally used. So that's what we're going to start using.
Yeah, and the reality is that we have evolved in these terminologies over the course of all these years as we've taken on these wildland fire problems. Originally, it was defensible space. And I still use it because I'm old and tired. So I still use defensible space, and we still use it, you know, in our documentation and everything. And then it became home ignition zone, because defensible space implies somebody will be there to defend it. Okay, we learn, we know, okay, evolve the language. Now it's evolving from home ignition zone to structure ignition zone, because, as Meg said, like, it's not just homes. Like, you know, you think about, you know, any number of these communities that have burned. It's not just homes that were burning, right? It's businesses, it's, you know, schools, whatever. So, you know, we're constantly having to evolve. When I first got into this, it was prevention, and we can't call it that anymore because we're not preventing the fires, it's risk reduction, right? So it's the evolution of how we have to adapt to the way these fires are treating our communities.
I saw your list of advisors, and I might have missed it was quick. Is the sheriff's office involved? And if so, is that through the Jefferson County FPO? Or how is evacuation should be, life safety is the first priority, property is the second priority. Lots of plans, including ours, existing plans, focus on property protection more heavily than evacuation, and that's great for a large number of fires, but there are situations where none of that's going to matter, and life safety is at risk unless we have a robust evacuation analysis and plan that's realistic.
Correct.
And so the sheriff's in charge of that, well, fire, but also that.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with that, in Colorado, the county sheriff is in charge of fire and in charge of evacuations. That's why we have the fire management officers. Jeremy Jones is the fire management officer for Clear Creek County, and Brian Keating is the fire management officer for Jefferson County. They both work under the sheriff in those roles for that reason. And then one of the additional documents, if you're interested, for Jefferson County's update, there is an evacuation annex that's on that same page with their draft CWPP update for public review as well.
Yeah, you know, switching to structure ignition zone and saying businesses are included, well, things like the activity center, you know, up near Walmart, or, you know, downtown Evergreen, the business district, be included in CWPP plans or their neighborhood?
I think for the most part, you know, we're gonna probably keep the business side of it still in the overarching Evergreen Fire Plan, because those are considered values at risk. Versus the intent of the community, that the CWPIPs are really the grassroots organizing of the community members. And, you know, and I know we've talked about this in the past too. In some places, it's absolutely feasible and realistic to make those touches and bring them into that fold. But in other areas, you know, the activity center, it's kind of its own beast. And that's something that's more at that district level versus the plan unit level, if that makes sense.
Sure, I just know
Yeah.
that there can be a lot of overlap.
Yeah, 100%, and it's really, in a lot of these areas, it'll be kind of case by case, because, I think about like the businesses down in the Marshdale area, those are a little bit more local, right, versus Walmart, right? So, and then we can look at downtown Evergreen through their downtown association. So they're not necessarily gonna have to be, it wouldn't be expected of the ambassador teams to deal with the downtown association. That would be at my level instead. So it's kind of case by case, but, recognizing the intent of the ambassador teams is really that community, neighbor to neighbor tie-in.
So, I think I heard you say that the county level plan, the Community Wildfire Protection Plan for Evergreen and the implementation plan are gonna be merged.
I wouldn't say
Collapse.
merge, but it'll be a complement to it within it.
So it'll be a single plan that's tearing off the countywide. Is that,
Yeah, so it's the Community Wildfire Protection Plan at the county level, separate document. Then Evergreen Fire's Community Wildfire Protection Plan. Within our protection plan, there will be the implementation plans for the plan units.
okay, and that's helpful, thank you, because I think one thing that I haven't seen as much of in the existing plans that I'd like to see more of, is we have several in Evergreen, well, all up and down Front Range, but we have several neighborhoods that are one way in, one way out. It's a very difficult problem because it would require a lot of concerted effort over time and large constituency to change the ability to provide additional access. There's neighborhoods that were developed with multiple ingress egress that were never given to the county and never made public, but still exist. And I guess it's disappointing to hear that the county level plan doesn't have any action items, because I think the county commissioners is the first level of political agency that can address those kinds of issues effectively through ordinances and local legislation, and ultimately affect state legislation where it's appropriate. There's been great progress, and you just drive around, you can see a lot of people doing home hardening and a bunch of other things. Well, good job. There have been too many fires where people have perished during evacuation. And that's not okay. And the only way to fix that is to try to do the harder work, perhaps, in a way, the political work related to obtaining access, even if it's emergency only, through existing private property for some of these neighborhoods. And I'm a little bit familiar with some of the plans. There's a couple examples that I can throw out, but not right now. But ultimately, one thing I see around us and I hear from neighbors and stuff is that people want to do everything they can to be safe in their home. And I'll bet you that if you got outside of the common, and in addition to the common wildfire protection plan models that we've been growing out of, and started focusing more and more on sustainable and survivable evacuation, and that's both the front end of it. The fire department's done a great job addressing as far as the time factor, but spatially, the ability to have multiple egresses depending on where a fire comes from, the road sizing and capacities, and it gets into working with the county on those kind of things. It would be great to have, I think neighbors would get together and go to the county commissioner and say, hey, what are you doing? Let's put this on your agenda. I bet you get enough people from Evergreen, Genesee, and other Front Range red zone communities to start showing up and asking questions, then maybe, and it's in the plan as a priority as opposed to, oh yeah, nobody really knows how to deal with this, it's too hard. In addition to all the good work that's going on, that makes the majority or many of the fires survivable. The ones that aren't, blow and go and whatever else, so I'll shut up.
No, it's, I love, like, this part of Jefferson County is beautiful, but it does make me scared for the residents here for like the exact reasons that you described. And to clarify, the Jefferson County CWPP does have specific recommendations, they just don't have specific fuel treatment priorities. And that was a decision of the core team to recognize that there's a lot of fuel treatment priorities from Jefferson County open space already and at the fire protection district level. So there are specific recommendations, some of them pertaining to evacuation and roadside fuel treatments, and there was an analysis done to look at priority treatments at the county scale. And then, you know, we haven't gotten to the point of making the priorities for each of the different plan units, but like in Cold Springs, I'm sorry, in CCCFPD, they had us, like, we drove around, we looked at a lot of these one way in, one way out neighborhoods, and there were specific recommendations, like in this plan unit, pursue an alternate evacuation route that would go off this road. So it was, you know, we could do the same thing in Evergreen, so it will be in a plan. It's not, the CWPP process can't go through getting permission from landowners to make it happen, but it'll at least be documented that it's an identified issue and that it could help protect life safety if there was another route that maybe goes, you know, in a specified direction.
Yeah, we can talk more about it. There's an example I'm aware of where there was a neighborhood route up Independence, which private property, never developed, never turned into a fully dressed individuals. The county allowed development in that previously existing right of way. Opportunity lost forever, probably. So I guess what I'm hoping is that the CWPP, either at the county level or I don't know if it's appropriate at the Evergreen planning level, looks beyond just the fire community into these other road and bridge, planning and zoning, all those others. And I understand you can't get too far into the political world, but sets the stage for having those conversations.
Yeah, and so in addition to that, something else that has been going on at the same time is there's a company doing an analysis at a county level, not just with the CWPP update, but also with planning and zoning. So and that's part of that Together Jeffco work that's being done, is that they are also looking at, and it's not even just roadways, right? It's also allowing development in areas that it might not be wise, or what different, you know, just building codes and whatnot need to be implemented for some of these neighborhoods in these areas that the truth be known, like, you know, and I've said it before, we put 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. And there's plenty of areas, you take Brook Forest, if I were to try and make that into a bigger roadway with a shoulder, I'm tearing down houses to do it. So there's a lot of areas, we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Unfortunately, that ship has sailed. And so that's where, at a community level and a fire district level, it's control what we can control and work within our means. Know, though, that as fire personnel, as, you know, concerned citizen groups as well, that conversation, you know, you already addressed it, right? A lot of these conversations have to be happening at a political level, and those are also happening, and those are getting pushed up in that realm too.
Yeah, please know that we are involved politically. We've been having discussions about the Wildland Urban Interface Code. We've been having discussions about planning and zoning in the building department, the transportation manual. We're involved with all of that. And it got pushed to the county commissioners. It actually ended up at the state level where the state's now looking at a statewide Wildland Urban Interface Code that needs to be implemented. So if you asked me if that could ever happen 5 years ago, I'd laugh at you, but it's happening. And so there is impacts being made at a very high level. With politics, that takes time. And it's just that, a lot of our areas very close to here that were built way before there were building codes. Those homes all still exist and are right on top of each other. We can't change that. That exists. We are doing things with priority treatment zones and isolating out. How can we help this evacuation area? Because that's a part of the point of the priority treatment zone. So James Estel, our wildland captain, under Chief Puffett, are working on, we don't even get grants for those, we're just doing them because they need to be done. So they're going door to door. Carrie is knocking on doors and asking people, can we cut this down? You'd be surprised how many say no. Because it's private property. Yeah. You'd be surprised. Private property in Colorado is private property, not like a lot of other states. So I like that tree because it's noisy down there by that road. But we're doing our best to educate people to let us open up those areas so evacuations are safer. And we're concentrating on those priority treatment zones that are identified in plans like this to get that stuff done. So life safety is on our mind, please believe me.
Roadside mitigation is a good example of how within the Evergreen CWPP, we will identify major evacuation routes and making sure, we're looking at prioritizing those roadside mitigation treatments where the modeling shows that congestion is going to get nasty. Let's be real, it's going to be most of the area. We can kind of throw darts and hit all the good spots. So that's a priority for us, those priority evacuation areas for the community as a whole, the entire fire district. Then when we get into the Community Wildfire Protection implementation plans by plan unit, that's when we can start to look at the more focused areas within each plan unit where you might, have a road that is gonna get congested in your neighborhood. It might not trigger at a fire district level, but it does trigger at a plan unit level. And that'll get identified in that implementation plan to say, hey, as a community, Evergreen's already got its top 10 it's working on fire district wise. But as a community, this road and this road are also a priority for you to get just your neighbors out. So as a community, y'all come together and you work on that with our support, mind you. We have our mitigation trailer, we have our ambassador teams, and we have all of those opportunities as a community to help you do that. We've got our mitigation specialists that can come out, get the home assessments done, mark that roadside, and then we can get it done. We have, as a fire district, we have agreements with both counties that if we mark something for a fire hazard and it happens to be in their right of way and the homeowner wants to take it, go for it. It's okay. It's got our blue paint on it.
As an example of the upper part of Witter Gulch, just recently I've been noticing.
Yep,
Selective
exactly.
cutting on the roads.
Yep, so Witter Gulch was one of our projects for roadside, and Carrie went through as one of our mitigation specialists, and with the help of the ambassador team in there, knocking on doors, getting home assessments done, and as part of our commitment, because Witter Gulch was a priority route, we sent our crew in and treated the first 30 feet of all participating homeowners. And then we also, in addition, tying back to your question, I coordinated with Denver Mountain Parks, and they actually are writing us a check for our crew to treat 50 feet of their roadside along Witter Gulch. So those partnerships, so that we can, again, make these priority evacuation routes safer.
Can you give me one more?
That's how my show is.
Of course.
So, change gears. Alternative strategies. Australia looked at some situations and started thinking about shelter in place and training, whether that's in a specific building or home or in a manageable evac zone, big giant meadow somewhere that might be a survivable area. Is any of that in consideration in the wildfire protection plans or implementation plans? Because some of the neighborhoods have so many houses and such bad egress. If the situation is such that it can't be an early enough, a temporal solution to get people out super early, are any of those next steps, okay, if this doesn't work, is that an appropriate thing for the wildfire protection plan, or is that just not on the table, these alternate strategies?
So what we have found is, are those alternate strategies realistic? In some cases, yes, and in Australia, yes. In areas where those potential zones have been predetermined and treated, is it a consideration? Sure. Now, what we've learned is when you offer somebody an opportunity to not leave, they don't. I cannot tell you how many people sat and watched Elephant View. That's when people die. So what happens now, part of the problem with this is that shelter in place is a term that was built and designed for firefighter safety. It was something that, you know, if it hit the fan for firefighters actively fighting the fire, that was their option with protective gear and equipment. It had to evolve as our fires have evolved with our climate chaos. And so in some areas, it becomes that worst case scenario. But it is in fact that worst case scenario. Your option is death. So in those instances, if that comes to such here during an evacuation, during a wildfire here, there will be emergency personnel that are going to have to direct, because there is not a single place in Evergreen, aside from maybe the Walmart parking lot, that I would be comfortable sending people to. The sheltering place in homes, unless you and all of your neighbors have fully done all of your home hardening and all of your defensible space, meaning I don't have to worry about any of those homes igniting, because once the homes ignite, that's when it really goes sideways. That's when the conflagration starts. That's when the homes start to domino each other. So really what we have to do is we have to take that step back. We have to educate people to do their due diligence in treating their property so you don't start that domino effect for us. And I need to get people to know, get out. Get out. Get out. Get out soon. Because when you sit and hesitate and you think, well, you know, I read somewhere that there's this shelter in place and I can go sit in Elk Meadow, so God, I don't want to have to drive all the way to Denver, the traffic is awful. No, that's where you're going to die. And I've joked about it, that some of these shelter in place zones, it's super helpful because that's where all the body bags get to come. So I need you to get out and get out early. If it got to a point where getting out is not an option, emergency personnel will create and hopefully direct in that zone. You know, the secondary evacuation routes, those are part of that conversation as well. I've got people that are always saying, you know, well, I'm gonna go off-road because I know this 2-lane road is awesome. And it's like, well, that's where we're gonna find you dead, because we know where we're directing you to go. And that's where we know how to keep you safe. If we have the luxury of having, you know, air assault on a fire, we can paint the roads if that becomes an issue. These conversations get had at the incident command post. So these are the things that will happen if you're off two-wheeling because you think you know a shortcut, we won't know you're there. If you go park in some meadow because you think it's safe, know that grass fuels burn it more than twice its height. So if you're in 2 feet of grass, you're easily in 4 feet of flames. And if you're not fond of pork rinds, I wouldn't go to try and shelter in place because that's what your ears become. Get out early. That's why we do our evacuation workshops. That's why we push this as much as we do.
That sounded like a no.
But I flavored it with so much other stuff. Wasn't it good?
All right, I think we're, oh, we have one more?
I need to go on what I was gonna ask you.
Okay.
Move on to the activity?
I need to hear what we came up with.
Yeah, well, right now what we're gonna do is we're going to, we're gonna move into an activity. So, we're gonna move into what we're calling the community voice. And going into this, we just wanna reiterate that we value your thoughts and opinions as community members, and we like to be able to refer back to activities like this throughout the CWPP process and after writing the CWPP document. So what we're going to do now is we're going to split up into groups so we can get your thoughts and opinions down on paper and use those as guides through our process. So based on the number of people we have, I don't think we'll be getting to 8. We're gonna do 4 groups, probably not of 8 to 10 people. But I'm going to go down each line and give everyone a number, 1 through 4. If you're in the number 1 group, you'll come to this corner of the room. Number 2 is that corner of the room. 3 back by the tools, and 4 over here. And we're gonna have 4 prompts that we will go over before splitting you up. And we are gonna take kind of like 10 minutes, probably 10 minutes at this point at each of the prompts to get some of your thoughts and opinions down on paper. And for each of the prompts, I'll give everyone, I'll probably yell out that it's been 10 minutes so we can move on to the next prompt and get everyone's thoughts down. Throughout the activity, Meg and I and also Jess and I think some of the team are going to be around if you have more questions, if you have any conversations or things you want to talk to us about one-on-one. We'll also be providing support for the activity during this time, and I would ask just that you stay until the end of the activity so we can get everyone's thoughts down and come back together as a group, do a short wrap-up, and take a look at that more detailed Evergreen CWPP timeline and when you might be hearing from us and seeing us again. So before I give you numbers and move you to different parts of the room, these are the 4 prompts we're going to look at, and I believe Meg is going to tell us a little bit about what these prompts mean to us and where they will actually go into the CWPP and how they're going to affect the work that we do.
So I just wanted to start by saying the Ember Alliance takes community input very seriously. I'm very passionate about getting input from the community and doing something with it. Like Carrie said, it's amazing that you all are here. Everybody has a lot to do with their time, and that you're here is very meaningful, and we want to respect that time. So when we do surveys, when we do focus groups, we do something with that. It might, the CWPP, there's, a balance. Your priority might not end up being the priority in the CWPP, but know that I will read every single comment. For the Jefferson County CWPP, I read over 500 individual comments. Some of them I had to take a break, walk around the neighborhood. Some of them were horrible and very mean. But a lot of them had really good nuggets of information that ended up helping the county prioritize which of the actions they were going to start tackling first. So we really want you to stay. We really want you to be engaged. We really, really want to hear from you, and we want you to write enough down on these sticky notes that we can interpret what you meant when we start writing this up and going along with document generation. So the prompts are and you'll get to go to each of these. So some, they overlap, so if you start talking about barriers and you're in the tools group, that's okay. But just know you will be getting to that prompt eventually. So the barriers are, what are your barriers to mitigation? This one is really important when it comes to prioritizing some of the resources and tools. So that's going to inform parts of the CWPP, where the county is determining what kind of issues are people still facing, because this community has been trying to make progress around wildfire resilience for decades. So what are the things that are like still the big issues? Hopefully some of those can be addressed at the fire protection district level. Some of them, like you said, they might be at a higher level, like political level, and then this process could be a chance for the community to recognize like there needs to be some kind of like political organization that happens from the plan unit level, taking it up to county commissioners. Resources and tools, that one, we've had some really creative ideas that people have proposed from that. So it's not just like what resources and tools do you need, but like what can you provide? What ideas, creative ideas do you have for getting some of those resources? Like for Jefferson County as an example, somebody was like, why don't you use, so an issue with like slash, not everybody has a truck to get slash to like slash people. So they're like, why don't you have like Boy Scouts, like help bring it to the side of the road and then someone else with their truck. So just like clever ideas like that. We want to hear them. Things that you think would work in Evergreen. And some of those might actually make it in the CWPP, and then you can tell everybody that it was your idea. Concerns, everything that this gentleman brought up, those would be great things to put down on the concerns list. If he said the same concern you have, write it down. Like if 3 people want to say the same thing, you could just put stars next to evacuation concerns. But we do want to know if multiple people like have the same top concerns. And then the values piece, I already wrote down when somebody mentioned the activity center, because we have like a, Pete's been really helpful in getting us a location of all the historic sites in Evergreen, and then we have, the location of communication towers, fire stations, but other resources that the community holds dear. Are there statues in town that you really care about that are built out of wood in the middle of the forest? I'm thinking about that weird gremlin that they had in Breckenridge. We want to know.
Yeah.
So I wrote down the activity center. I'm going to add that when I'm back at my computer tomorrow as a point. So you're already contributing meaningfully to the CWPP. So we're hoping to get more of that as we continue the activity. So number.
You have 27.
Okay. Math is not my strong suit.
6-ish per group. 6 to 7
Yeah.
per group.
I think I'm still gonna count off just in case people that came together sat together, so I can get some.
Separate them, but just
Separate them, yes.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so any questions before I give everyone numbers and we go to the 4 corners of the room and start writing down on our prompts? Cool, okay.
1.
I'm skip. 2. 1. It's okay, I'm not gonna have you there.
Or 1.
2.
3.
1.
2,
3. 4.
1,
3. 4. 1.
2.
Elk Meadow and.
1.
2.
2? Is that everyone?
There's someone missing, I'll tell her she's a 3.
Awesome, perfect. Okay, so again, 1 in this corner, 2 in that corner, 3 by the tools, 4 by the kitchen. And to come here and write down your crazy ideas so we can put them in the CWPP and really have that community voice shine through the entire process. I did promise to put the timeline of the 2025 CWPP update up with a little bit more detail. So this timeline has kind of some of the stuff that we already talked about, but it also down towards the end, and I do realize it is small font, so apologies there, but down towards the end we have a few continued touch points with you all and with the community, including some of the plan unit ambassador interviews and engagements we have in October and November. We're going to have a final community meeting in the beginning of 2025 when the CWPP is rolling out, as well as the public comment period. So similar to what's going on with Jefferson County, their open comment period, we will be doing that with the Evergreen CWPP as well. We also have, in the middle of the room, we put out a plan unit map. It's one of the things we've been working on and trying to get just perfect and just right for your community. So Jess mentioned the plan units in the beginning of the meeting, how everyone in Evergreen is in a plan unit. So if you don't know what we're talking about, that's the perfect place to go and see what we're talking about. And if you do know what we're talking about, then we've worked really hard to incorporate feedback so far to make changes to those plan unit boundaries and make sure they're including everyone that it makes sense to include. So please take a moment to go ahead and look at those. And then if there's any final questions, Meg and I and Jess and team are around. So yeah, if there's anything you want to follow up with from today or anything you want to ask us, we'll be around for a little bit. So thank you, huge thank you again.
Thank you.